If you would like, you can make your way to Psalm 42. Psalm 42 is where we'll be for a lot of the lesson this morning and where we've been for the past several weeks as we've looked at this theme, when the waves keep coming. When the waves keep coming. And it comes from verse 7 of this psalm where the writer, the psalmist, says that all your billows and breakers sweep over me. And we feel that, right? We feel what the psalmist is describing. We know what that's like, where it just seems like the waves of life are just rolling in. And sometimes it's one really big wave that completely knocks us over and sweeps us underneath the surface, and we feel stuck and we wonder if we're ever going to come back up for air. And then other times it's just these daily, persistent waves that roll in, that knock us a little further back and a little further back. And it's just the daily grind of these waves of life that roll in. And as we think about that, as we've thought about this image that the psalmist provides for us when the waves keep coming, we've been asking the question, when the waves of life keep rolling in, where do we find the strength to stand? How do we make it through the storm? How do we stay afloat in the midst of the tumultuous seas and the waves that roll in? And so far we've looked at a few things. A couple weeks back, we looked at sort of these spiritual life preservers that keep us afloat in the storm. And the first one was that it's not supposed to be this way. This is not the way that God designed the world. It is a shalom-shattered world. The peace and the security and all of the beauty of what was in the garden and what was originally intended for us has been corrupted and it's been broken, and that brokenness has even entered our own heart, and we've contributed to it in some way. And so it's not supposed to be this way, and that's a reality that we have to come to face. But the thing that we looked at last week was that I don't have to do this alone. That in the midst of the storm, the best spiritual life preserver is ties to other Christians. That there are people to make it through this storm with, that I can lock arms with and bear the waves of life together. And then next week we'll look at this life's not ultimate. That this world is not only supposed to be this way, but there's hope beyond this world. There's hope beyond this life, that this life is not ultimate. There's a promise waiting for us. But then this week, the one that we'll look at is this: God is not indifferent. God is not indifferent. Have you ever felt forgotten? We've probably all had some kind of experience like that where we have felt forgotten in some way. I remember when I was little, I got left behind at the church building one afternoon. And so here I am, 5 or 6 year old Jarrett, waking up to nothing but this big, dark, empty building. And I wasn't there long, and if you're gonna get left behind anywhere, the church building, that's a pretty good spot. You're gonna be pretty safe there. But I was forgotten. Now, that wasn't a huge deal. We've since repaired that relationship. Me and my parents are on good terms now. But there are some moments, right? There are some moments in life where we really do feel forgotten. And there are some moments where we even feel forgotten by God. And it may be for any number of reasons. Maybe prayers go unanswered. Maybe the dreams that you had and the plan that you had for your life to play out isn't going in the way that you thought or that you dreamed up when you were a kid. Maybe it's just the daily grind of life, the day-to-day things, the persistent challenges of just the things that we might have to go to on a day-to-day basis, those things that we face. Maybe tragedy enters your world, or sin enters your own heart and it grips you and you're struggling and you're wondering how you're going to get through this, whatever it might be. Maybe sometimes we just wonder, why in the world would such a great God care at all about my problems? Why would he even bother? And so for whatever reason it might be, when the waves of life keep coming, when times get hard and every trace of his goodness and of his presence seems to be absent from my life, we wonder the question, why have you forgotten me? God, why have you forgotten me? And it's actually that same question that the psalmist is asking here in Psalm 42. It's a psalm about somebody who feels forgotten by God, and he describes this feeling in several ways. In verse 1, he describes it as, he says, I feel like this deer that is just desperately searching for water. In verse 3, he talks about how it feels like his tears have been his only food day and night. In verse 4, he describes how he feels stuck, remembering how good things used to be. And isn't that sometimes the hardest part about it? When we go through these hard times and we're swept under the surface, we kind of take this moment to just pause and we reflect and we reimagine how good things used to be and the way things used to go and how we used to be surrounded by the people of God and his presence felt so real in our life and everything seemed to be going the right way. When we have those moments, it makes the hard times even harder. Remembering how good things used to be and we feel stuck. And then twice in the psalm, he describes how the people around him are asking, where is your God? Where is your God? And don't we hear that question today? Where is your God? People look at the evil and the suffering of the world around us and they ask that question, where is your God? Where is your God? And when the people around you start to ask that question, where is your God? You start to feel that question within your own heart and within your own mind. And so we ask that question, why have you forgotten me? Finally comes verse 9, I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? And here in this psalm, there's not really an answer. And although God doesn't directly answer his question here in Psalm 42, the psalmist, he does come to a conclusion himself. There in verse 11, he says this, hope in God. Hope in God. That's the conclusion that he comes to. I may not understand. This may be really challenging and difficult. I may be wrestling with this question where God is. I may feel like he's forgotten me. But at the end of the day, I will hope in God. And I hope that that's the conclusion that we can all come to. That even in the midst of the storm, even when every trace of his goodness does seem absent, that we will choose still to hope in God. But while that may kind of allow us to tread water and kind of keep our head above the surface, God has given us an answer that is much fuller that we can hold on to in the midst of our storms. And to see that, I want us to go to the story of Isaiah. So if you want, you can turn over to Isaiah 49. But as you make your way to Isaiah 49, I just want to kind of set the stage here. Hundreds of years before Isaiah was written, long before the times of the kings or the judges, God delivered the people out of slavery in Egypt. And as he did that, as he delivered the people of God out of Egypt, he not only saved them from something, but he saved them for something. He saved them for a purpose. And in Exodus 19 and verse 6, he says, you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So Israel, this is Israel's story from the very beginning. Israel was chosen by God to be his holy servants to all the world. And just think for a moment how incredible that would be. What greater calling could there be in life than to be the chosen servant of God? God had brought them out of the darkness to then be the light to the rest of the world around them, to be his holy and chosen servant. But by Isaiah's day and time, Israel had totally failed to be that servant of God. They trusted in other nations. They became a land that was filled with idolatry and all kinds of horrible things, and they had completely forsaken God. They had completely forgotten him. And for hundreds of years, God tried everything he could to win them back. He tried everything he could to show them his love and his devotion and his faithfulness, and to win them back from the direction that they were headed in. Until finally, the fastest way back was if he just let them go. And it led to disaster. Assyria and Babylon came through and decimated the land. And it was this horrible sight. They brought the people into exile, and by 586 BC, the temple, the dwelling place, the very hot spot of God's presence was totally destroyed. And through Isaiah, God had promised to send someone to be the servant that Israel never could be. He had made this promise through Isaiah that there would be a servant that would come and be the servant that Israel and the rest of the world never could be. But now in this moment, in this greatest moment of despair, as the walls of their world are just crumbling all around them, here's what the people say. But Zion said, "The Lord has forsaken me. My Lord has forgotten me." The Lord has forsaken me. My Lord has forgotten me. The title Zion here, it may refer to several things. It has to do with the faithful remnant of the people of Israel. Maybe some who had returned from captivity, maybe some who were still in exile. But the point I want us to see is that now it's not just one person who feels all of the weight of that question in Psalm 42, where is God? It's all people. It's all of the people of God asking this question. And in fact, it's not even a question anymore. It's a conclusion that they've come to, almost an accusation. The Lord has forsaken me. My Lord has forgotten me. And as the people wrestle with this reality of the world around them, look at how God responds. First of all, he doesn't respond in maybe some of the ways that we would. He doesn't just dismiss their concerns. He doesn't just say to get over it. He doesn't just say there's no room for that kind of raw authenticity and that genuine emotion among the people of God. He doesn't say any of those things that maybe you've heard before when you've brought your cares and concerns and expressed those to someone. No, instead, God says, I hear you and I see you, and here's what I want you to know. Here's what I want you to remember. And he actually asks them a question. He says, can a woman forget her nursing child, that she could have no compassion on the son of her womb? So to comfort this remnant of Zion, God uses this analogy. And maybe we don't often think of it this way, but God's saying, yes, I am the holy and all-powerful creator of heaven and earth. I'm the King of kings and Lord of lords. But there's something about this analogy. There's something about this picture that the love that a mother has for her child that shows you something about who I am. And there are really several things. First of all, emotionally. I'm kind of a mama's boy. I guess I've probably always kind of been that way. But I can look back and I can remember times where I've seen the love and compassion of my mom in so many ways. I remember growing up, I had really bad asthma. And so my mom would do the breathing treatments with me. I had to do a breathing treatment almost every night. And so every night I would sit in her lap and we would rock for miles and miles in that rocking chair till I finally fell asleep. I remember she would read to me every night before I'd go to bed. This was, of course, many years ago. And I remember just even like on mornings when I had a big test, she would cook a big breakfast for me, give me some brain fuel, and I can just think of all these different ways that I could see so evidently the love and the compassion of my mother. And maybe you have experiences like that. We probably all have experiences like that. In fact, many of you know what that's like on the other side. You know the love and compassion that a mother feels deeply toward her children. And in fact, that's what the word compassion literally means here. It is to be deeply moved with motherly affection. So there's this certain emotional bond between a mother and her child that is just inseparable. But there's a bond physically too, right? And you know this. When a mother is nursing, it is literally physiologically impossible for that mother to forget her child. There's no way that's going to happen. God designed it in such a way so that it is within the very nature of this mother to feel that need, to never forget that child. So everything about who she is compelled in every way to love and to care and provide for this infant. It's within her very nature to never forget. But it's not just emotional or physical, it's also unconditional. It's not like this. It's not like, okay, this diaper, it's a little bit too dirty for me. This was a little over the top, and so I'm not really feeling the love anymore. I'm just going to kind of turn the other way. It's not like, oh man, this is way more expensive than I thought it was going to be, and so maybe this was a bad idea. It's not like that. We would think there would be something horribly wrong with the kind of mother that thought that way about her child. Because we know, instinctively, we know that the love of a mother is unconditional. There's nothing that this child can do to earn it. There's no way that this child is going to impress the mother in any way. It can't walk. It can't even speak. There's nothing that this infant does to win over her love and affection. It's just there. It's just there, and it never goes away. No matter what that child might do, no matter what that child might grow up to be, or how stubborn or rebellious or maybe even hurtful that child could be through the years, and all the ways it might take on these selfish habits, even through all that, no matter what, the love of this mother is never going to go away. It's unconditional. It's unconditional. And so you can see part of what God is saying here. Can a mother forget her nursing child? No way. No way. It's impossible. But then look at what God says next. Can a mother forget her nursing child, that she could have no compassion on the son of her womb? And then he says, even these may forget. Even these may forget. I mentioned a moment ago about how I was left behind at the church building, and maybe you kind of have an experience like that. Maybe you were left behind at the store or wherever it might be, and it was only for a moment, and it was a complete accident, at least you think. It was a complete accident, but in that moment, you were forgotten, because even these may forget. Even these may forget. On a more serious note, I remember the first time that I came home after my first semester at Florida College, and I came home and I went to hug my grandma, and I realized she had no idea who I was. And she had been fighting dementia for a while, and so I knew that day was coming. But I remember how much it hurt in that moment to know that she would never remember who I am again. But even these may forget. And you know, sometimes there really are just bad mothers, and they hurt their children in ways that are undescribable and that are far-reaching in ways that they'll never understand. And in a way, even these forget. But God says, even these may forget, even though these may forget, I will not forget you. I will not forget you. Listen to what God is saying. God is saying to this faithful remnant who feel abandoned and forsaken and who see the walls of their world just crumbling all around them. He says, think about the love and the compassion that a mother feels toward her nursing child. Is there any way that she could forget? Absolutely not. There's no way. But even if there was some way that the love that is so great could somehow be forgotten, I will not forget you. Emotionally, I'm attached to you in every way with a delight, in a joy, in a compassion that is beyond comprehension. And physically, everything about who I am, everything about my nature, everything about my glory and my might and my faithfulness, everything about who I am, my very being is compelled toward you in every way. And unconditionally. Even when you have forsaken me, even when you have rebelled against me, and no matter how far off into that distant country you might go, I am always there with open arms, ready to welcome you back with that same unconditional love. So God, he's saying the greatest symbol of love on this earth, all of the love and the compassion and the care that a mother has for her nursing child cannot compare to the love that I have for you. And I want to ask, what do you think would change about your life if you actually believed that? What would change about your life if you really believed that truth? That the God of the universe loves you with that amount of affection. I love the way that one author put it. He put it this way. He said, if we really believe this, then there would be a fountain of joy at the foundation of your life that no tragedy or circumstance could put a cork in. Isn't that true? I mean, if this truth was a reality to us, if you were consciously aware of that in your mind and in your heart, and it was ever before you, wouldn't that change everything about your life? Wouldn't that provide you with an endless source of love and joy and affection and confidence that could never be shaken, that no trial or circumstance could overcome? Imagine what your life would look like if you really believe that. Imagine what this church would look like if we all really believed that. That the God of the universe had that amount of love and affection for us. And the people of Zion desperately needed to hear that. But God, in this moment, in this passage, in this hope that he's trying to give to them, he's not finished. Because to this point, it's still just words, right? It's still just words. And so here's what he says next. Verse 16, behold. Behold. Think about the love and the affection that a mother has for her child, and know that she cannot forget, and that even if she could forget, I will not forget you. But even in the moments that you doubt that, even if you don't believe that right now in this moment as the walls around you are crumbling, behold, look at this, see for yourself, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. Have you ever written a note on your hand? Maybe you were writing notes in class, and then all of a sudden there's this mention about a test coming up, and so you switch from your notebook and you write that on the palm of your hand. Or maybe you're in some business meeting and you have to jot something down real quick. You write that on the palm of your hand. Why do we do that? Why do we do that? Well, it's because it's ever before us. It's everywhere we look. We're never going to forget that. We look down and it's right there. Oh, I remember. It's written on the palms of my hands. And that's part of what God's saying here. That your name, your life, your well-being is ever before me. In fact, that's what he says in the very next phrase. He says, your walls meaning your prosperity, your hope, your abundance, all of the provision that you might need, your walls are continually before me. And so that's part of what God's saying here. I've written you on the palms of my hands, and I'll never forget that. It's always before me. But isn't it so much deeper than that? I mean, if that were it, God, for us today, he could just say, I put you in as a reminder in my phone. I turned on my notifications. I'm not going to forget it. But it's more than that. It's more than that. It's deeper than that. It's more beautiful than that. It's more amazing than that. And it's so much more tragic too. The word engrave here, it literally means to chisel with a hammer and nail. And in that day, it was a practice for the servant to have the name of his master engraved on the palms of his hands, but it was never the other way around. It would have never happened in the reverse. It would have been unthinkable for the master to have engraved on the palms of his hands the name of the servant. There's no way. That would have been unimaginable. For the master to become the slave and have the name of his slaves written on the palms of his hands, no way. And yet, isn't that exactly what God has done for you? God, the master of heaven and earth, became the servant when those nails were driven into the palms of his hands. So often people ask that question, if there really is a God, if there really is a God out there, then why is there all this evil and suffering? If God really is all good and all powerful and all these things that the Bible says he is and that Christians say he is, then why do I see this evil and suffering around the world and in my own life and in my own heart? Why is that? And it's a good question. It's a question that I've wrestled with, and it's a question that I believe has very good answers. But what we can know for certain, what we can know with absolute certainty is this. Whatever reason it might be, it cannot be that he's indifferent. It cannot be that he doesn't care. It cannot be that God has forgotten us. God is not indifferent. Because the God of the universe, the maker of heaven and earth, took on flesh and he entered into the experience of human suffering. And he not only took on flesh, Philippians 2 says he took on the form of a servant, or literally a slave. And it says he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. A cross. The master came down from heaven and became the servant that you and I never could be. He took on flesh and he took on the form of a servant. And as he died the death of a slave and as he hung on that cross, do you remember the words that he said? my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you forsaken me? And as you behold those nail-scarred hands, here's what I want us to see. Jesus was forsaken by God so that you and I could be remembered by God forever. That's what God is telling us here. Jesus was forsaken by God so that you and I would be remembered by God forever. And so can a mother forget her nursing child? No way. Absolutely not. But even if she might, God says, I will not forget you. And if you don't believe that, in the moments where that seems so hard to believe, and the moments where the waves of life keep coming, and the presence of God seems so distant from your current situation, God says, behold, see for yourself, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands by the nails that were driven into the cross. And I will not forget. I will not forget. And so as we wrap up this morning, I just want to encourage two things. Two things that we can do when it starts to feel like we have been forgotten by God. And the first is this. When you feel forgotten by God, number one, bring God your broken heart. Bring God your broken heart. I think if we were honest, a psalm like Psalm 42, a prayer like that, if we heard that prayed out loud, it would make us a little bit uncomfortable. We hear things that David writes and some of these other psalmists compose, and we wonder, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. We hear them say things like, God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you turned your face from me? How long am I going to wrestle with this turmoil in my heart and deal with this abandonment that I feel from you? And we read all that and we wonder, I don't know if that's crossing a line and crossing into a zone that I'm not supposed to step into. But do you remember what Peter said? He said, cast what? Some of your anxieties on him? No, he said, cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. He cares for you. He's not just some indifferent bystander who watches at a distance. No, he cares and he knows. He knows the thoughts of your hearts and he knows the experience that you're going through because he entered into it himself. And no matter how great or small your struggle might be, no matter how big or small that wave might be, he knows what it's like and he cares and he wants you to tell him. He wants you to cast all your anxieties upon him. And so instead of harboring your emotion and keeping that locked deep within you or trying to offload that onto some other person or through some substance or addiction or through some comfort that we might seek out or distraction that we might run to, instead of any of those things, bring that to God. Bring that to God. Tell him the truth about how you feel. Tell him when you feel like he's abandoned you and forsaken you. Tell him when you wonder, God, why have you left me? Why have you forsaken me? Bring God all of your sorrow and your pain and your resentment and all your brokenness. Because if he laid down his life at your feet, then what burden does he not want you to lay down at his? So bring God your broken heart. Lay down your burden at the feet of the one who laid down his life for you. And as you do that, as you bring God your broken heart, the last thing is this: speak the truth into your soul. Back in Psalm 42, the writer, he's not only questioning God, he's actually questioning himself. Several times throughout this text, this psalm, he turns inward and he asks himself this question: why are you downcast, O my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? And both times he gives that answer: hope in God. Hope in God. And so throughout this psalm, he's preaching to himself. He's speaking the truth into his heart. And I was talking with Lawrence about this earlier this week, so this thought comes from him. And so you may have heard this before, but you know, the most important preacher in your life is not Lawrence. It's certainly not me. It's not whoever preached the best sermon you ever heard. The most important preacher in your life is you. That's the voice you hear the most, and no voice will shape your life more than the one that you hear every day inside your own head. And so when you face these doubts and these worries and these fears and concerns, Pause and speak the truth into your soul. Pause and remember the truth that God has given to us. Remember that he's not distant. Remember his words, I will never leave you or forsake you. Hear him say those words, lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. Speak the truth into your soul. Because the times when it feels like God has forgotten us are likely the times when we've actually forgotten him. The times when we have forgotten his promises, the times when we've forgotten his faithfulness and his service and his sacrifice and his love, the times when we feel most forgotten are probably actually the times when we've forgotten him. And so when the waves of life keep coming and you feel forgotten in the midst of the storm, behold the love that God has shown for all of us through his nail-scarred hands on the cross. And remember that Jesus was forsaken by God so that you and I could be remembered by God forever. If you're here this morning and you are feeling like the waves of life have toppled you over, or like those persistent waves have continually washed in and you feel stuck, then reach out to the spiritual life preserver. Reach out to the people around you, and most importantly, bring that in to God. And if we can help you do that this morning in any way that we can, we ask that you come forward now as together we stand and sing.
No soul standing on this mountaintop, looking just how far